Hello, my name's Fred Thompson. I was born on the Hill End Goldfields in 1928, and for most of my early years I was referred to as Tubby or Tub. My great-grandparents moved to the Hill End Goldfields. I had a good childhood in Hill End. I had wonderful parents. My father came to Hill End when he was about 10 or 11 years old with his older brother, who was probably 12 or 13, and just the two of them drove a horse and dray from Cobar all the way through to Hill End, and this would have been in about 1892, 1893. My grandfather was also born at Hill End, and the family came to Australia in 1839. They left England, arriving in Australia about 1840. My mother was a lovely lady. She had 12 children and raised all of us children in a lovely, loving family. We didn't have much in the ways of money, but fortunately we had 10 or 11 acres of good land right in the village of Hill End. And my father's brother had another 3 or 4 acres on the other side of the lane, and that lane is now known as Thompson's Lane. We had gardens, great vegetable gardens, and we had a dam where we always had water for the gardens. We had fruit trees, and we were more or less self-sufficient. My mother made lots of jams, and we dried fruits and everything that was done. My mother was a wonderful cook, and as we grew up, the older ones in the family helped to look after the younger ones. 5 of my brothers served in the Second World War. Another brother was in the army, but he didn't serve overseas. And another brother served in the National Service. So altogether, 7 of my brothers served in the armed forces. I was lucky I didn't have to, and I was very pleased I didn't. We had a good life at Hill End. My father would work at anything. He farmed the land and he grew wheat and oats, and we would harvest that and put it in the hay shed. And we had what you would call the old horse works, which was a horse-driven chaff cutter. And Dad would cut the chaff up with the horses, 2 horses hooked onto the beam on the chaff cutter, and Dad would sell the chaff for 2 and 6 a bag. That doesn't sound much now, but the weekly wage for an adult in those days was probably 15 shillings or £1 if you were lucky. My dad and his brothers and my brothers, the older ones, used to go fossicking and get gold, and Dad used to get relief work. He would do anything to earn money to keep the family going. Initially, he and his 3 brothers spent many years cutting wood. He was a woodcutter, and he had this wonderful horse and the old dray, and they made a good living carting wood to the mines to feed the big batteries that did the crushing. And all in all, we had a good life. We still have that property at Hill End after about 100 years, and it is still a farm. In the late 40s, early 50s, the artists from around Sydney and other parts of New South Wales came to Hill End, and they bought a little cottage. Donald Friend was one of them, and there were many others, and they formed this little artists conclave. And Russell Drysdale's famous picture, The Cricketers, the batsman in that painting is my cousin Ted Woolard. And the last time I saw Ted, he said that the bowler could just as well have been my brother Bill or Roy Holloway, who some say he was the bowler. But we all played cricket at Hill End, but we didn't play much cricket uh, by the old hotel, which I think Russell Drysdale chose because of its location. We mostly played our cricket on the northern side of the old Presbyterian church, which was a cleared paddock, and we used just opposite our school, and that's where we played most of our cricket. Yes, I had to leave school when I was 13 years and 10 months old. My father wasn't well, and I had to leave school and do the heavy work around the house. I had to milk the cows, build fences, look after the calves, and basically all the things around the house that Dad used to do. Some of my older brothers, the brother next to me, used to be there for a few months, but then he went off to Bathurst to work, and I worked and helped my mother during that time. Unfortunately, in August 1943, my father had a heart attack and died 40 or 50 miles from the nearest doctor. And that was very hard for our family, but I continued on. My 5 brothers by that time, most of them were serving overseas, and one was up at Darwin during the bombing raids. And I kept on I used to have to go to the post office and collect all the allotment monies, and with my mother, we used to look after the accounting of the money, and we got along very well. I had 2 younger brothers at that time, and I also had to keep my eye on them. But eventually I left when I was 15. I left in late 1944, and I went to work on the railways. But at the time when I left home, the brother younger than me, he was 13 or 14, and he carried on where I left, because in those days, when you turned 14, you had to go and get a job. You had to make a living for yourself. It was a normal thing to do. Unfortunately, it was difficult to get an education at Hill End, but I took on then correspondence and passed my government exams later on, and was able to get a good government job, which my father had advised me to do not long before he died. He said to me, "Fred, go and get a good government job and you'll be right for life." And he was pretty good. But even if you have a good government job, they look after you after you've left work. When I left Hill End, I went to work for the railways at Mount Victoria. I had previously been to Sydney and passed the railway junior porters exam, and then I had to wait till they called me up. But there were no junior porters vacancies at that time. So I went as a junior assistant to the railway refreshment rooms in Mount Victoria. And that was a very good job. We had to load the trains and look after the cook that ran the railway refreshment rooms. We'd have to get the coal and look after the fires and all that sort of thing. And we lived on the premises on the eastern side of the railway line. We had good living quarters there, and we got all our meals in the refreshment rooms. So it was a very good job and very nice people. I think there were about 50 young women employed there, and they used to have a bar that was open for the soldiers. While I was there, many troop trains went through, and when they were coming into Sydney from out around Bathurst or Parks, they would stop at the Mount Victoria platform, and we'd have to have 7 or 8 coppers, fired coppers, and we would boil gallons of water, and they would make big stew pots of water, and then you'd dish it out to the soldiers in their dixies, which is what all the soldiers had. It was like an aluminium tray that they could either drink out of or eat out of. And there would be 500 or 600 troops on these trains going through, and we looked after them. Then I went to board at Blackheath, and I got a job as lad gatekeeper. I was still a junior porter, but I hadn't got my position. And that was where I met Joan. And Joan was about 16 and I was about 17. And Joan had a beautiful little pony. She called her Tibby. And she was black. And she would probably been about 13 or 14 hands. A lovely little pony. And I actually met her down at the swimming pool at Blackheath. We went swimming down there, me and my mate one day, and we met Joan and her friend Shirley Law, who was staying with Joan, and that's how I met Joni. And she used to ride this beautiful little horse named Tibby. And when I knocked off my shift as gatekeeper, I would walk back up towards the Pines, which was the old guest house, and Joan would be up just off the highway on a hill there waiting, and she had this lovely little white blouse and fawn jodhpurs on, and she would be sitting on this horse, and I said, "This'll do me," and I used to throw my cap up in the air and catch it. And when I had my retirement, I was telling my story. When I retired from the post office, we had about 120 people at the bowling club. And I told them that I used to go and see Joan on the horse. And I said that I didn't know a great deal about girls, but I knew a lot about horses. Some of the best years of my working life were spent in the New South Wales Forestry Commission. After I left the railways in about 1907, I joined the Forestry Commission to work in a survey party, which was led by a forester, and we had about 6 other young men there working, and we used to travel around New South Wales doing site assessment surveys to see if the land around these towns would grow Pinus radiata trees. We did surveys on the pine forests of New South Wales, like Nalbo and Murruguldry, down near Tumut and Wagga Wagga. And that was a great life. And I ended up in 1949, I was made foreman in charge of that survey party. And we camped in the pine plantations, and we did quality surveys, and we had to do traverses and draw maps of the pine plantations. But I loved that work, and I tried to pass the New South Wales forestry exams, but I didn't have the level of education in those days. But I eventually left the Forestry Commission in late 1949, early 1950, and I was fortunate enough to get a job working in the postman, and I was lucky to get it. It was in the mail room at Katoomba. That was in 1950, and work was hard to get then because you had all the men coming back from the war in the early, late 1945s, early 1946, and most of the jobs were taken, and there was also a slight depression in those days. But anyhow, then I got the temporary job, then that cut out, and they asked me, did I want to stay on? I said yes, I wanted to keep the job. And they said, well, you can go to Candos as a postman for 3 weeks. And then they said, no, we'll keep you on. Do you want to go to Dunedoo as a postman for 3 weeks? So I took that job. Then when I came back, and actually while I was at Candos, I sat for the examination for postal officer. And I passed that exam, and then I was made permanent about September 1950. And then I just went up through the ranks, and that was when I had to do my correspondence studies, and I eventually passed the Commonwealth 3rd Division exam, which was approximately equal to the leaving certificate. It took me 2 or 3 years to pass that exam, but I remember once I was in the kitchen about 9 o'clock, and Joan was expecting our second child, which was who became the filmmaker's mother, Susan. But I was sitting outside there studying, and Joan called out, Fred, are you coming to bed? And I said, yeah, I won't be long. I've just got to finish this little bit of study. She said, I think you better come now because I think I'm going to have the baby. So that was that. I gradually made my way up through the ranks in the post office. I went to the telegraphist training school at Strathfield for 15 months, full training. And then I graduated as a telegraphist, and I commenced duty at the Chief Telegraph Office in the GPO Sydney on the 4th floor in 1953. I was travelling up and down from Katoomba, so I got a transfer to Blacktown, which was easier. As a postal clerk, I changed from the telegraph room to the postal side. And then I gradually went up. I was promoted to Senior Postal Clerk Grade 1 at Springwood in 1963. And then I was appointed Postmaster Grade 2 at Lawson. I had my own office there. We had a telephone exchange, 2 postmen, 2 junior postal officers, a postal clerk, a postal officer, and about 7 telephonists, all under the one roof. My next promotion was to Senior Postal Clerk Grade 3 in 1973, but prior to that I acted as Senior Postal Clerk Grade 3 at Penrith, and that was stated as the assistant postmaster. I held that position for 10 years, but during that I served as postmaster Seven Hills, postmaster Mount Druitt, postmaster Katoomba, and then in 1983 I was promoted whilst serving as postmaster grade 4 Seven Hills, acting there. I was promoted to postmaster grade 4 Springwood, and I retired from that job in 1987 in October, and I had a wonderful working life in the post office. I had great people to work with and made many lifelong friends. Fortunately, I'm still able to read Morse, and I can still read Morse. And last year I went to the Powerhouse Museum, that is, and I sent telegram messages to the children, sent their names, and I also received the names, typed them out, and the children could see how Morse code worked. At our last Morse Codians dinner in Sydney, we had about 80 or 90 people there, but only 21 of those could still read Morse, so I'm not doing too bad. The children used to write their name down, and one of the operators, that was an ex-telegraphist or postmaster, would send the message to the chap further down the desk, and he would receive the message and type it on a little telegram form and hand it to them, and they were amazed how it could come from one point to the other. And not this time I was down there last year, but the year before, Tom Keneally came in. I thought I recognised him, and his grandson was there, and we had a chat to his grandson and let him send on the Morse, and that was a good memory. Tom was a very nice fellow. But my career in the post office was very rewarding, and they're still looking after me. I still get my pay every fortnight with my superannuation. And that's it for today, boys. And it's good night from him, and it's good night from me. Good night. Ben! Ben! Come on! Come on, Ben! Jump! Up! Yeah. Sit! Look, Jimbo! Sit! Sit, Ben! That's the girl. You're a good girl. She's a lovely little dog. She wants to play ball. Look. Go on, Ben. You bloody